Okay, so hello,
Hi there.
it's me.
Is
And
it
you.
me you're looking for?
I was trying to think. Am I thinking of the Taylor Swift song that just came out, or is it?
Hello.
It's me.
Is it me you're looking for?
I think that's the one I was thinking of.
I can see it in your eyes.
So we just had a little bit of fun getting the audio set up here.
Oh, we're starting now?
Yeah, no, this is it. This is
Oh,
the thing.
okay.
The red dot's going, so it's recording, and we're just gonna wing it and hope
Yeah.
that the echo across the mics, because the room is fine. It's the when these mics get too close to each other, they both pick it up. And I'm a novice audio engineer. I'm not gonna use that title. I'm a novice audio enthusiast, and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So we're here and we're trying it out. Steve, how was your week? What did you do this week?
I was sick part of the week.
It sucks. Don't do that.
And then I helped my sister and brother-in-law move. That was a good time.
I fucking hate moving, dude. I've moved 3 times this year.
Yeah, it sucks.
I hate it so much.
Yeah, it's just...
It gets easy. Like, you can be good at it. You can get easy. But,
guess.
it's emotionally draining.
It's all the things draining. I mean, it's tough. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of hours that you put in of just mindlessly moving back and forth.
So you guys get it down one load? One go? A to B? Or is it A to B to A to B?
kind
to A to
of.
B?
I mean, they had to kind of pre-move some stuff to other places beforehand, but day of, it was pretty much, yeah, I think so. It was 2 trucks, 2 SUVs,
Fuck.
and a U-Haul. That was
2 trucks,
17
SUV.
feet.
Fuck me, dude. That's 5
And they were...
for 2 people?
and a dog.
For 2 people and a dog.
And 3
I mean,
cats.
That's not. It's a lot of pets. That's a lot of stuff. I'm sure. House to house, I guess.
Well, you know.
It's what it is. I've gotten rid of so much shit. And actually, this maybe ties into something. I had an interesting conversation with my mother this week about because oh god, well, I got that right in the mic, just right in the fucking mic.
Gross.
So
You uncultured swine.
what are you drinking there? You were telling me what it was, but I kind of interrupted you earlier.
A wine. It's called Sweetheart by Fireside or something.
We had candles going earlier. It was adorable.
Yeah. And this is the wine, the same company that I drank, I think, on another episode, and you asked me about.
Oh, really?
And it's, I believe, a local place.
Oh, gotcha.
Sweet wine.
Sweet.
Sweet wines, yeah.
Have I told you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
The reason why Iowa wine is sweet.
Yeah, you've already gone through this.
It does take about 20 minutes to tell that story.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to, but it does.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with my mom. I'm drinking Modelo, as you know.
I do
I
know.
like it. It smells like weed and tastes like better Corona, I guess.
Tastes like beer.
Had a conversation with my mom this week because I moved down to Texas, and not to this basement.
You had a conversation because you moved to Texas.
Because I was like, fuck, I am in Texas. I need to talk about this.
I talked to my mom right away.
Well, I mean, I'm living with them for a little while.
So you had a conversation with your mom.
And it was interesting. I think it was Friday night we were talking
Happy
about.
birthday to Texas mom, by the way.
Yeah, Thursday we made. Oh man, I made the best bolognese and bruschetta. Bruschetta.
I don't know, man.
It was good though. I followed this the core recipe of this Italian guy who has like a bunch of subscribers on YouTube. I don't know. It seemed legit. He made a lot of Italian mannerisms. Bruschetta.
That makes it legit, I think.
I think so. I was convinced. As a Southern hillbilly, I was
wouldn't
this
know
seems
any better.
Italian to me. But
You're talking to mom.
I was talking to mom after dinner about
We've set the scene.
we set the scene. I need another 15 minutes of scene setting. Can we we'll just speed through it. No.
Okay.
And we're talking about like kind of the value of work. I can't remember exactly how I landed on this topic, but it was basically I kind of wedged in there with we were talking about something, and ultimately I mentioned how capitalism is just as a system is a distribution of wealth, right? Like there is labor, and then there is wealth as a result of labor, and capitalism and communism and other things are ways to distribute that wealth. It's systems. No moral good or bad or whatever. They're just systems.
Sure.
And I was trying to have this conversation with my mom, and one of the things that we ran into was I was advocating or starting to lean into this idea of like, she was sitting there, I can't remember the exact context for this, but it's like, I'm sitting here doing nothing, and that guy over there is busting his ass. I should not get paid more than he does, or this, that, and the other. And I started talking about how, like, I was like, money is a system that is not inherently necessary in my mind. And she kind of called out, she was like, well, if Steve has something I want, how do I get it? I have to barter. Or steal.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking for a second. And I was like, okay, so the predicating element of this whole conversation is this idea of ownership, from the book I'm reading slowly over the last year, called The Dispossessed. It talks a lot about this idea of proprietarianism. It's a term I use basically to own and conceive of ownership.
Sure.
And I was like, so in an ideal, this is also another element of the conversation we had, but like in an ideal, to me, there would be no concept of ownership. Because ownership, I think, at the natural level doesn't exist. Everything is a rent-based system. I'm borrowing these cells and this matter, and it's going to go away and go into the system, loss and entropy and all that other shit.
It'll get recycled later.
Yeah, like my existence is a loan, and it's going to get paid back and then redistributed elsewise.
Yeah.
So like fundamentally, in my mind, ownership is just kind of a non-concept. And that my mom really struggled with that. My dad kind of clicked with it. My dad was like, yeah, it would take a lot. We have to go way back in human history for that to change that element.
Sure.
I was like, yeah, fair enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one thing to say that the laws of nature don't allow for ownership. I mean,
I wouldn't say they don't necessitate. I wouldn't say don't allow, because obviously human beings own stuff. We have this idea of proprietarianism.
But again, you don't really,
right?
I mean, after you pass away, I mean, you don't. It doesn't. And then
we make up magic rules that we then agree to and
right,
follow.
You pass it on to somebody else, but then
that doesn't mean anything.
Well, look at how many things after 12,000 years don't exist anymore.
Right.
They get returned back to the earth, so to speak, and literally as well. Yeah, so I think that's a natural law and order, but one thing that humans like to do is just put parameters around things, like to categorize and all that. And so part of the categorization is a sense of ownership, whether that's of property, idea, significant other, what have you. It turns into a human
this and the other
construct.
There's a line between them.
Which isn't to say that it doesn't then exist. That's the weird part about it.
What's interesting to me is another book I've read recently. I think I've talked about this before. So where does our sense of putting parameters on things come from? A book I read called The Left-Handed Darkness. I think I've talked about this before. Ursula Le Guin, philosophical, science fiction, fantasy stuff, right? She wrote this book called The Left-Handed Darkness, and it's about a planet full of androgynous human beings that oscillate between what would be considered male and female genders, but in that society, in their language and their culture and all these things, there's no gendering, right? They don't have this is a human female or this is a human male gender. They have the gender for animals and stuff like that, but they don't have anything for someone who's stuck in what's called Kemer, which is when it's almost like not menopause, sorry. It's almost like the menstrual cycle of sorts, where it's you just hormones go crazy, you become that gender.
Sure.
Or you lean into one gender. It's called Kemer. And some of the characters in that world get stuck in that phase sometimes. And they're referred to not as they, but as the male, male animal or female animal. Not female human, male human, but female animal, things that are gendered elsewhere in the world. But that world struggles with, that planet didn't have quite the same concept of possession as basically the point I'm getting at is I wonder, and I think Left-Handed Darkness kind of puts forward this a little bit, that our concept of this and that, us and other ownership, I have this, you don't, almost is rooted in biological gender.
In gender?
like kind of our perception of the world maybe is, and this is, I'm 2.5 years
Sure.
deep, man. I don't
I would probably not agree with that.
know.
I think it's more of a.
I want to clarify. I said biological gender just because like there's that foundation.
I mean, I think it's
physiological
more
variance.
more of a sense of maybe attachment and security,
Okay.
and a sense of also maybe making your place in the world, sort of thing. It's in a way, it's kind of a coveting of certain sense. I mean, as a child, one of the first things that you learn is attachment, to your parents and your family,
Right.
and so that implies a sense of permanence in a way, or a sense of like ownership. This is my mother.
Yeah.
This is my father. And so I think early on we probably have this sense of that's survival initially
Right.
for as a child, and then as you grow into an adult, it takes on a different meaning. It's trying to concretely establish your place in this universe, and you do that. I mean, how else can you? I mean, you can't. I mean, that's what we
Right.
kind of established. Is you can't do something that's necessarily concrete unless you build a giant pyramid. Which that lasts for quite a while. But
For a minute.
I think
Generally
that's
speaking, things are not.
yeah, a sense of legacy, perhaps, or something. There's some comfort into that, some security and safety that maybe helps you sleep at night.
That's one of the things I struggle with is just not necessarily the idea of like owning things and the possession of something versus which necessitates the not having of other things, like the
Yeah.
us, them, that division, drawing that line. Like I get it, I see it. It's just like where does that come from at just a foundational, fundamental level? Where does that association with the world come from? And do like other animals have the same like what is the gradient of experience, right? Like, and could human beings disassociate from owning stuff? Could we now at this point in time? I guess that's my question to you right now. So we've established this idea of property, and we've asked the question of where
Yeah.
it comes from. But like, could we right now or given all the history up till now, starting sometime in the near future, try to like drive, not that this is good or bad or anything like that, but would it be even possible to drive the world, some culture, country, whatever, towards this idea of non-ownership?
Maybe. I think
Is that even
maybe
possible?
through natural selection. I think it may be an exception more than a rule. To
But just like sociologically, like could
the
you?
feeling of non-ownership, I think, is more of an exception than a rule.
Yeah.
I think it's a factor of. I mean, you look at, a lion kills a gazelle, and if another lion tries to take that, he gets pretty upset about that, and that's it doesn't.
It's like
It's a sense. It's a form of ownership in a way. I mean, it's not the same as like I own a house, I own a car.
lions is an interesting example. You've heard of like the infanticide stuff that they do? New male lion joins a tribe,
yeah,
kills all
yeah.
the babies or whatever.
Which I mean, it's again a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
It's an ownership of your genealogy.
And how much of that, like, because it's an element of survival, scarcity comes into play in my mind when you
Yeah.
talked about the gazelle example, like
Survival.
Lion Steve kills a gazelle. Lion Tex comes in and tries to like, hey, I'm gonna take some of this,
Yeah.
and you
I'm gonna be mad.
You're gonna be mad. You're gonna be real mad because like,
Yeah.
as
It's
far
mine.
as you know, this is the last meal you could ever have. Maybe
Could
that's
be
a bit
that.
of an extreme, but you know,
Sure.
it's this idea of scarcity, and so like, I need to survive. That's my one
Or maybe
prerogative.
just hangry. Like I'm really hungry and I'm meeting this immediate biological.
Yeah, there's these
need, not so
emotions
much-
to it that are like kind of not.
I don't think
conscious.
because I don't think there's a sense of like a lion doesn't know like this could be my last meal.
Right.
It's going to be more driven by its baser instincts of
Interesting.
I'm hungry. I need to eat. And so
Another burp for
excuse
you
you.
guys.
And so I think it's driven based off of that. And I think humans are no different. I think their sense of ownership comes from a biological drive.
And it's reinforced sociologically, and our systems
Yes.
reinforce it, right? Like,
Yep.
and
the
that's
systems
not
are
just.
designed to push those buttons.
I don't know if it's like I don't think it's an exclusively intrinsic biological drive either. I think there's. Maybe I'm convincing myself something, but I think
that's where it starts. But I think it flourishes by.
I think it flourishes in the presence of scarcity. Because like if you said you would need and want for nothing. If you wanted something, it would be provided for you. If I stole your wine, and someone said, here's your one to one, right?
Yeah.
Like, would it be as big a deal? And it's hard to say that having never experienced that, right? But like in my mind, I think the scarcity of existence and
Yeah,
plays into that, and it's chicken and egg, right? Like,
Sure.
does the drive towards ownership and drawing those lines of me, them, my stuff, their stuff, whatever, does that is that innate, or is that influenced by the environment? I would argue it makes no effort in trying to draw the distinction, because depending on your perspective, the environment and the ecosystem and the terroir of all that, and the human being that exists within it, it's one collective organism, right?
Sure.
Like if you look at it from a high enough, and they kind of they literally organically influence each other one way and the other.
Right.
So kind of, it's almost fruitless to ask that question of like, where does this come from?
Yeah, and
It just exists.
You think about the people that are driven by greed and all that and wanting more, but that's generally probably filling some sort of void.
Yeah.
And then, we've had this conversation before about why people have certain drives and the void that they're filling.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get into the whole psychotherapy sort of thing, but it's probably driven by something.
We're no experts in any of this. We're
but
just talking.
It's easy to speculate to say it was something maybe missing from their family, from
Sure,
their childhood. Whether it's a direct trauma or if it's like they weren't loved enough or something.
There's an Instagram like meme. I don't know if meme's the right term, but like there's an Instagram meme of like that I've seen a time or three, and I don't even know, it might just be the same freaking like post that I've seen 3 times. But it's like, what you seek in a partner is what you lacked in your upbringing, or something to that effect. Which what you were saying kind of reminds me of that comment. But
if you're unfulfilled, I suppose that would be your drive.
right.
As I've learned, and I know some people around me have learned, that's not the best way to go about things. You want to try to be fulfilled as a human being and find somebody independent of whatever is going on inside of you, as they are an independent person, and not to make you better.
Yeah.
Or make you whole.
Don't rely on them. I get and not necessarily in a bad. And I don't mean don't rely. You've got to be able to like at least build the architecture, the support beams, to keep yourself going. You can't put that kind of weight. And we're pivoting a little bit here, but this is an interesting conversation for me. It's like you can't put the weight of like, hey, I need you in my life, whether it's a friend or a parent or a lover or a romantic, whatever, right? Like any type of relationship. I think it's dangerous. Like, on one hand, you gotta have socialization. That's a core human element. You have to socialize. Like, you go fucking batshit insane, and you're in some capacity, you're gonna be an unhappy person. But at the same time, you can't put all of your existence and the weight of your stability. The stability cannot be determined extrinsically. It's got to be intrinsic to a degree. It's unfair to the other person, because then all of a sudden they're putting under all this pressure. They can't handle. They've got their own shit to figure out, man.
Right. You don't need the person. You don't want to need the person. You want to want the person.
Yeah.
This is a major difference.
My parents told me that growing up pretty early. They were like, "Hey," because I remember it was like maybe high school, started dating, all that stuff. Teenagers are always just like madly in love with everybody.
Yeah.
And so they're like, you want them. You need to want, not want to need.
Yeah.
Something like that. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's like, oh shit, that kind of rang with me pretty well.
Right.
I have a hard pivot conversationally.
Okay.
Do you have any last thoughts on the topics we were just
Which? Oh, no. I mean,
okay.
Go for it.
Because one of the things
Pivot
I
away.
mentioned earlier was like, is it worth even asking whatever question, right? I had an interesting conversation a couple weeks ago where we were talking about, one of my good friends, he asked about free will and does it exist?
Oh,
it's
man.
an exhausting conversation for me because I land somewhere about this, but I want to ask you, Steve, does free will exist? What is your response to that question, to being asked that question?
I tend to steer clear of having that kind of conversation
So do I.
because I believe
Despite the fact that I asked the fucking question.
I believe I explained this to you before, but there are people that I know in my life that I find it impossible to have that conversation. I brought up some thoughts about it, and I think that a lot of people have a hard time imagining that they don't have free will. They can't come to terms with the possibility that that might be true.
Yeah. We talked
And-
about that a lot with regards to like control. Like how much
Yes.
control and agency do we actually have?
And how much do you want is the other side of that too.
Do you want to just be always thinking pump, heart, right? Like
Well, not just that, but
as one example.
I think, you know, I'll continue to bring this up, but like the thing with your ego and needing to be similar to what we were talking about before, like needing to exist concretely,
Yeah.
to have my meaning, to have validation in my life, to be loved by people around me, and all that. And you know, a fair amount of that is driven by your ego, and that need, and whatever need that is.
And that I feel like that does tie the need for validation, the association with ego, and the discomfort with not even the result of the question, but just not even the answer, but just the asking of the question and talking about it. Like there's an element of ownership that you've got to be able to be able to answer the question of free will and whether you have it or not. I think you have to be able to let go of ever having it. Because like if you are uncomfortable with the option that you don't have free will, then you're gonna have a fucking trip of a time trying to even understand that question.
Yeah.
One of the things me and my friend Anthony, I like the way he kind of put this. He was like, it's a question, it's an unsolvable question, and what's gonna change between a minute ago, now, and a minute later?
Right.
What about my life, how I act, what I do is gonna change whether or not I have free will?
Your life will continue the same way,
As it would have.
knowing that information or not knowing that information.
And in a way, it feels kind of oxymoronic, but like, is that also not kind of free will? But also, like, free will and determinism seem like the same thing, just looking at it from a different perspective. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but like, it's like being able to say, nothing matters, so therefore it doesn't matter that nothing matters,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
because everything's deterministic, it doesn't matter what you do. It's bound to happen. So just do whatever.
Right. If you can.
If you can. But then
Because
like,
if you don't have free will, then you can't. I mean,
but then that's the
Can't do
thing,
whatever you
right?
can,
Like
yeah.
is like if I just, do that,
yeah.
was that going to happen? Was that destined? Was that deterministic? Was that like
Sure.
not necessarily like fated, like prophecy wise, but just like, is it deterministic that I was going to throw my notebook on the ground? Or this is the matter of perspective is the issue I'm driving at here.
Yeah. But you also did it to prove a point.
Right.
So there was a cause and then an effect. So
Something was determined by something else.
yeah, I would. Okay. So
This is I don't
personal
need an
opinion.
answer to the question. My answer is I don't want an answer. I don't know if an answer is possible. I don't think it can.
Yeah, I mean, I could go into I mean, if you believe, not believe, but I mean, it seems to be factual that there are certain laws in physics that would probably indicate that we don't have free will to the extent that we think we do. Now, there's enough complexity in the system to maybe appear that we do.
What if like what if choice is just entropy? That's such a dumb thing to say. I don't know why I said that.
Well, no. So there's actually something to the fact that, so if you look at something like intelligence, and you look at the different systems or parts of the brain, and you could express and then correlate that with maybe artificial intelligence, or just even other biological systems, there's a bit of a correlation to complexity and the level of intelligence, seeming intelligence that outputs from a system. And so then you can then have interesting conversations, especially if you watch the Lex Friedman podcast, about what intelligence is, what is something that's conscious or not, and all those things that kind of go around, I don't know, human existence, intelligence, and all that. And you could make certain arguments about the fact that the more complex the system is, the more intelligent seeming that it is. So again, thinking about the parts of the brain, humans having more parts of their brain than the lizard, let's say,
Sure.
and we think that we're intelligent and we assume that we're conscious beings in our universe, whereas the lizard is not. And so is that just a symptom of our complexity of our system?
Mhm.
And so taking that to free will, it's like, well, is free will an illusion that's just made up of a complex enough system that we think that we have a choice in this world? I don't know. That's my perspective. I tend to lean towards the fact that we probably don't.
So here's
I think it's just an illusion built into the complexity of our system. There, I said
I
it.
think.
You got an answer for me finally.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a very
the
rare-
longest-winded point you've ever made, and I'm not saying long-winded in a bad way, right? Like everything you were saying,
Sure.
built on top of itself. But usually it doesn't take that long. But it's a complicated
For me to
question.
give an answer, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I
that's why I
appreciated
usually
that.
don't have those kinds of conversations because not a lot of people sit through the nuance of the explanation.
I'll take that as credit to my endless intelligence because I'm
Could be the wine.
could be the wine and it could be the beer. But one of the things you were talking about, trying to work through beer brain and catch up with one of the things you were saying. So it was interesting. I was having this conversation. I do an esports podcast with a buddy of mine for this amateur esports stuff that we're involved in, and we were talking about practice today. And I mentioned this beforehand. We were talking about practice, and specifically with regards to practice, we were saying, like, I was talking about how happy path, right? Your practice builds up to the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Practice is prep for the match day, getting on the pitch, getting on the rift, getting in the game, playing, competing.
Yep.
And if all you're doing in practice is cutting ruts through the road for the happy path,
Mm-hmm.
you ain't doing yourself any favors because the happy path is easy,
Right.
right? Winning is easy. Succeeding is easy. Failure is the stuff that's really difficult
Mm-hmm.
to deal with. The unhappy path is really difficult to deal with.
Right.
And when I'm asked the question of free will, I think kind of responding to what my friend Anthony kind of talks about a little bit, or his perspective of like, how does that affect my life? I kind of lean on that a little bit. It's like, okay, so if I do have free will, that seems like, to me, that seems like the happy path. That seems like the easy one where it's like, everything I do is intrinsic, unique to me. I have agency and control over my decisions
Yeah.
internally. Now, obviously, there's external factors that affect that, but in a vacuum, I have free will. Easy. I like that. That seems to click with my brain.
Sure.
Maybe there's some nuance to it. I don't know. I'm kind of dumb. But that seems like the easier path.
Mm-hmm.
The unhappy path is like, you don't have free will. Everything's deterministic or to some definition of determinism or perspective on it. And you don't have free will. And that's like kind of existentially dreadful. I think both have their own existentially dreadful element to it because like, what does total free will mean? It means what determines that then, right? Like what has given me free will if I have total free will? Like,
Yeah. It's the infinity conversation, sort of.
I don't know what the infinity conversation is.
Just whether it exists or not. I mean, like whether.
Oh, like the conversation just keeps like.
No. Just like is the universe infinite?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like
Yeah.
what started the Big Bang, or what happened before that, or there's I'm blanking on.
Dude, it fucks with me so much that we can sit here in your house and
Yeah.
just chat about the fact that the universe is an unknown, like the origin of the universe is genuinely unknown.
Yeah.
And the existence outside of very small fragment of knowledge is unknown. And
Right.
time is a construct, maybe. Like all this stuff, like,
Yeah.
and
We're
we
like
fucking,
a dust
I'm gonna
speck.
wake up at 5 a.m. and hit a blue button on a computer screen to release a product to the prod
Seems
environment.
kind of pointless. I mean, what we do is not pointless. I'll put that out there. However, but in the grand scheme
it's
of
so
things,
fucking weird.
yeah,
And then
you're a speck of dust on the floor, and there's so much more world out there. It's crazy.
and it's like we just go to work every day.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's bad to go to work. It's just how are we able as human beings to compartmentalize that and just put that
Yeah.
away. Just like it's
think-
there, and I'm just gonna keep on trucking.
I think that's one thing that's missing in today's society that
In society,
today's society that really, when you think back to like the ancient Egyptians and ancient cultures, and how much
I think there's two: is Egyptians and other.
yeah, everyone else. But just like at how much awe there was and representation of the universe and knowledge of constellations in the solar system and all those things. And what I gather is that they, because they didn't live in the kind of society we do now, they had a lot more time and less light pollution and all that. They were able to
You could sit there and look at the stars.
yeah, they were able to invest more of their life philosophizing about what is out there. We don't do that anymore.
It's
as much.
incredible how another incredible thing that we've compartmentalized is the consequences. Again, saying this as I'm not educated in any of this. I'm no professional or academic about it. I'm just
Just a guy,
I'm just a guy spitballing. Just a dude.
just a man sitting at a poorly built table.
It's not a poorly built table. It just has a perfectly placed crossbeam to smash my knee into. And depending on effective, ineffective, or neither.
It was going to happen anyways.
it was determined to happen that way.
Destined to be.
I
built
what
it
the fuck was I talking
years
about?
ago, knowing this moment would happen.
Years,
Smash your knee.
whole years. You know what's wild? I'm
But
try
maybe
to
it will lead to you finding the love of your life. You never know.
It's talking about
So you're
loves of
welcome.
lives and stuff. When did you build this table? 2020?
Sure.
Because you said it was
I don't
kind of COVID-ish time, right?
Pandemic-ish.
Yeah. So I lived 2020 half a mile away. The whole year I lived half
Really?
a mile from here.
From here?
Yeah, I lived in Broadmoor, which, don't dox us.
Sure.
Apartment buildings just down the way. As I was driving up, I was like, oh yeah, I've driven this. I was living at my ex's place.
Interesting.
We were
Okay.
together at the time.
Yeah.
We were cohabitating during all of 2020 and most of 2021-ish. No, doesn't matter. But anyways, I was driving by. Rolling back to the whole point I was trying to make about
Do you mind if I bring us back to the free will conversation for a
Absolutely
second?
bring us back to the free will conversation.
I think I said free will. The free will conversation.
free will and free will?
I just finished a really awesome show.
Oh, yeah?
And you should check it out if you haven't seen it.
What's this show?
Called Devil's Hour on Amazon. It's been
Is
advertised.
that a
all
live
over.
action show? Or is it animated?
It's a live action
Okay,
show.
sorry. For a
Yeah,
second,
yeah.
I thought it. Anyways.
It's got I foresaw this moment happening and I was like, I need to look this guy's name up and that way I will remember it.
This guy.
I believe he was a doctor from the Doctor Who, Peter Capaldi.
Peter Capaldi?
Yes, and a bunch of other British actors. It's really good.
Yeah.
So
Devil's what?
The Devil's Hour.
The
If you go on
Devil's
Amazon,
Hour.
it's going to be like
Sure.
right away, just because they want you to watch it. But I recommend it because
Free
it's
will
a
or
good show.
something.
It does have to do with a sort of predetermination, free will and not free will. It kind of argues for a little bit of both, actually, in a way, in a really weird way.
Interesting.
Without giving too much of it away, like if you start watching it, you'll know what I'm talking about as far as.
I'll
how
give it a
shows
watch.
both.
I'll give it a watch. I've been needing a new.
It's
Is it like
Good. It's
comedic,
really well done.
dramatic, somewhere lighthearted, more intense?
It's a suspense drama, not quite a horror.
Gotcha.
It would be. Let me see what this.
Just trying to figure out when during the day
Thriller.
I
It's a thriller.
should watch or not watch this thing.
That's one of those things that I kind of thought about. I was like, should I watch this before bed or not? And I did watch it before bed, and it really didn't mess me up that much.
Okay.
So like it was
I'm
because it's not. I don't want to give too much away. It's not strictly about like the drama. I don't want to say serial killer.
I'll give it a
type
watch.
Thriller.
Yeah.
But it starts as that, but it morphs into something that is
Interesting.
So they show a lot of ads for it, and this is before I started watching it in the ads, so this isn't really a giveaway. Peter Capaldi is in custody with the police, and they're asking him, they're like, so you think you're a time traveler or a fortune teller? He's like, neither. I'm both. Dun, dun, dun. And so that's like a premise of it, but man, it really messes
That sounds
with your
so
brain.
campy, and I love it.
It's awesome though.
That sounds great.
And that's
I'm
just-
here for it. I
That's
love
not
camp.
just the wine talking, but it's like it's good. I immediately looked up, is there going to be more? And they're going to do a second and third season.
Good.
There you
Good.
go.
Devil's Hour.
Go
I'm gonna
watch
look.
it. And then we can
Talks a little bit about free will.
a lot of it.
A lot of it. A
Yeah.
lot of it. A little bit. A lot of it.
Mhm.
w-
I want you to have seen it so I can
Happy
talk
Path,
about it.
Unhappy Path.
Yeah,
that's
there
what
you
that's one of the things I want to get out the door. Similar with like work stuff too, where it's like let's forget the happy path. Let's imagine. Let's go on a little journey, a little voyage, where we imagine ourselves living in the unhappy path. And what does this circumstance look like, and how would we mitigate it, or can we just like, if we just place ourselves there and imagine ourselves there and doing nothing but just living in the unhappy path? Is it okay? Do we survive? Do we feel okay? Are we still us? Do we feel like us? And with it, when it comes to the free will stuff and the determination stuff, that's kind of where that's like my strategy. Like when you present me with like kind of almost a binary question of like yes or no, and it's not an inherently binary question, right? Like you do or don't, or maybe like this show, some element of the middle. I actually argued about this, not argued, but I made a comment because I was hanging out at a cigar shop, drinking whiskey, smoking a cigar, playing Go or not Go Bon, doesn't matter. Go, the board game with my friends, and we were talking about this, and I was like, yeah, a single hydrogen could have been in a different position when I was an embryo, and that could have cascaded to a totally different circumstance right now. Like I could have placed the stone here and here. Like,
yeah, you need to go watch that show. Like
there's so much, and I think that's maybe where I fall. Is like maybe there is free will, maybe there isn't, maybe there's some shades of both.
Yeah.
Can I live with the worst case scenario? And I've kind of told myself, yeah, kind of.
Kind of have to.
And that's the thing too, is like, whether it is, and I love that philosophy that my friend Anthony has of like, it doesn't change what I do.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, I think one of the dangers with just like leaning too heavy into that mindset is maybe not even asking questions. I think the value of that mindset is not getting hung up on the answer to the question. It's enjoying and living and experiencing, maybe not even enjoying, but just being in the experience of asking the question, of thinking about the question.
If you're capable of philosophizing.
Sure.
I don't know that everybody is.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Just one of the things I think a lot of my friends, and I for a lot of times I feel like it's my friends who are also like not stuck in, but kind of have that propertarianism mindset of sorts. And it's like a lot of times some of my friends get stuck in on finding the answer. Like you got like driving towards an answer.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy told me anything, the answer doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
The question, it's important to ask the right question instead of seeking an answer, right? Like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, everything doesn't bring that up. It's like, what's the meaning of life? What is it? What's the meaning of the universe, life, and everything? Or something to that effect, right?
Yeah, I can't remember.
And it's like, well, that's a pretty fucking big ass question to ask a computer that you made.
Yeah.
Like, maybe just go. The meaning to life is just go fucking live it.
Yeah.
You're not gonna know until you do it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like ask the right question, don't seek the right answer. With the free will and determination stuff, it's kind of like, I don't know how to answer that, and I think it's probably some shades of both. But I don't think answering it, actually like determining an answer, does me any good.
Right.
And one of the challenges I have is the conversation I'm having with someone about that topic, are we driving to an answer, or are we discussing what those paths look like?
Yeah.
I'm totally cool for the second one, but if we have to end this conversation, whether now or in the future, by landing at an answer, I don't want to be a part of it, man. Like, and no offense to anybody. It's just I don't think we can answer that.
It's one of, a few for sure conversations that I tend not to have with people.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain topics that are just non-starters, just for the sake of people just have strong opinions on it.
Yeah.
And kind of, you understand the sense of like learning and exploration, and sometimes just thinking through or going through the process of it just for the sake of that process.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like I said, with expectations and control, a lot of people are they hear something they don't like and it's a bad taste in their mouth, and they will fight to not think like it has to be this way. With the free will thing, it's like I have to have free will because they don't want to take a moment to sit
Mhm.
with the idea that maybe they don't. And what would my life be like if I didn't? They don't want to do that.
And so to go back to the happy path, unhappy path, try to bridge those two things. What bridge that concept I was talking about with what you do, kind of to preserve my sanity to a degree. One of the approaches I have to these kinds of conversations is to just be like, what is the scariest option, right? Like, what of these answers is the most terrifying? And then I'm going to try to figure out how I could live in that circumstance, how I could live if that was the answer.
Yeah.
And if I can figure out how to live there, I can figure out the whole fucking spectrum, right? And then you know what? If I can figure that out for myself, like if I can come to grips with that, and then usually the common denominator is like it is kind of an answer of, it doesn't really change what I'm doing now,
Right.
and I gotta just keep on keeping on.
Just gotta enjoy the ride, man.
Kind of enjoy the ride as best you can do, right?
Yeah.
Like when you stare death down, it's like that's one of the things too that I struggle with is this idea of like I'm going to die one day. And I'm not super comfortable. One of the things it's been really hammering into me is I've been doing a lot of living back in my childhood home. I've been doing a lot of reminiscing. I've been thinking about a lot of memories that I have and how like I can't imagine like right now. This is explicit. This is clear. I'm so present right here, and this feels very tactile, and everything is
Yeah.
here. In 3 weeks, I'm going to think back to this, and it'll still be mostly there. But in 3 years, I'll think back to this moment, and it'll be kind of fuzzy, and it'll be kind of like a dream.
It becomes metadata after a while.
Yeah, and that's because of the way memories work. But then I think back to like moments growing up that like I struggle. Well, it has initially that initial fog, but then I try to imagine what it was like being as present as I am now.
Yeah.
Then, and then I'm imagining when I'm on death's door, right? Thinking about the 70, 80, whatever, how many years before that moment and all those memories, like this one, and how will that feel and all those things, right? And it's so perplexing and initially uncomfortable and very scary.
Yeah.
But then it's also like the one of the grounding quotes in my life is this idea of true voyage is return, right? And that imagination back and forward in time, back in time, is itself a voyage. But I have to remember to bring myself back and let that inform now.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of it is like imagine the future, reminisce on the past, and understand all those things, but let it inform the present because future is infinite, the past is unknown.
Yeah.
And doesn't like none of it exists except for right now. And the best I can do for 80-year-old me, 90-year-old me, whatever, hopefully 100, right? Be kind of cool, is be as present as I can now.
Yeah.
So those memories are so deeply vivid and so reassuring when I go on to the next stage of life, which is not life itself, but death and all that stuff.
And when you do that and you try to live as richly as you can in every moment, that so one of the things that helps solidify a memory is your sort of richness of that experience. Sometimes that's because it was like a really negative experience, like a car accident. Sometimes it's like getting married or telling somebody that you love them for the first time, that sort of thing. And so if you can try to live like that, then hopefully your brain will kind of codify that to fill a rich feeling of life.
I always wonder, so like it's such a cliche, right, to say carpe diem, live your life, be present, like live it like it's your last or whatever. And I love the way you've described that right there, because I think a very common interpretation of that whole like philosophy, mindset or whatever is fucking YOLO, dude. Like wing yourself off a cliff with a parachute or something. It's like, I mean, sure, yeah, that's cool. Go for it. I'm probably not going to do that. But I think it's the sentiment. It's you don't have to, it's the intrinsic sentiment. It's, are you there? Do you see the color and feel the emotions? I think if you lock away.
Are you paying attention?
Are you paying attention?
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily like, are you fucking sitting there taking notes? It's like, all right, the brick was red, it was MDF, it was got an outlet there, we got a little, no, none of that shit. It was more like, are you, and it's a very Taoist, again, I say this, I think every episode it feels like, but it's like a Taoist practice of like letting go of things. Like have you let go of everything surrounding this moment, of everything clouding your brain as much as you can, and just being like tuned in. And not necessarily requiring yourself to be tuned in. It's that letting go of anything at all and just being there and soaking it in and being that sponge. Because then you can really, that I think, to me, that is the carpe diem. That is the seize the moment, live the day, YOLO bro kind of shit.
It's kind of how they say you're supposed to meditate is just imagine that you're watching clouds pass by. Or traffic is a common one because if you think of your thoughts as cars passing by, and they're depending on your framing, they're intrusive or not. They just happen, and so if you're sitting there, imagine that you're sitting there watching the traffic, and you can either focus and fixate on the cars and trying to stop the traffic or direct the
You can
traffic.
kind of unfocus your eyes and just
Or you can just sit there and just watch it drive by and experience it as taking it all in at once, as it just is.
When I talked about the esports stuff and practice and things like that, I talked about getting really excited about failure. Because like if you can learn to be excited about failing at something and the information and the learning and the thrill that comes with being able to try again but learn from it, it brings a lot more fulfillment. I think a similar thing of like, I hate it when people say they hate small talk.
I hate small talk.
Fuck you. Fuck you. I'm kidding. But I think it's contextual. I don't necessarily hate when people say that, but like it kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way because like similar to getting excited about failure, I think there's something really enriching about getting excited about the nothing of every day, right? The little mundanities, like watching the cars drive by. It's kind of a nothing to do. You're like sitting on the bench and just like listening to the birds and stuff. It's not grand and life changing or some major event. You're not making $1 million. You're not busting your ass to make some. It is as mundane and as regular. And that reconnection gives you it's the connection with the highs and the lows and all those things. It gives you the stratification to life experiences because everything's relative to each other in some way. And I think that's enriching and it's a good practice to work on.
I suppose you could argue that it's not mundane, though. I mean, especially if your intention is to just sit and watch.
That's a good
That's
point.
not quite mundane, right?
Fucking chicken and egg, determination, free will, matter, perspective.
I think with the small talk thing, it's just a matter of, like, I would much rather be talking about something that's not superfluous, like, oh, it's raining again today when it's obvious it's raining. It's like, yep, sure is.
Sure is. I think, dude, so I'm going to jump into the small talk thing a little bit. We're jumping all over the place today, and this is all the fun of it. For me, small talk is interesting because it is, and I might be overthinking it, but it's a nuance. I think it's more nuanced when the simple conversation about weather is such a fun way to get connected with someone you have no connection with at all.
It's a gateway conversation.
It's a gateway. Like obviously, it shouldn't be the only thing you talk about necessarily. It could be. It doesn't matter. Nothing should or shouldn't be. Things just are, and they are not. But like just chatting about the weather and like it's part of the being present is like, I think effective quality small talk is, are you actually present? Like when I try to talk about like when I go to Casey's or whatever and just have a chat with the cashier, and like we might talk about the weather. I'm like, yeah, it's been pretty rainy, but like leaning into it and be like, yeah, but how rainy is it? What's the feel like? Has it been like pelting rain, just icy and sleety, and like, man, that really made it tough to drive in? They're like, oh yeah, and it's I think small talk can be an extension of that meditative practice of presence, of like being present, right?
Sure.
Because it is just like letting go of any other conceits and predilections. Yeah. And just being like, what is the weather today? What's it like? What's the texture? What's the smell?
I kind of cheat, I think. And if I am interested in talking, I will. I mean, you can use it as a springboard to something else. So if you go into the gas station and you know that their standard protocol is like, oh, okay, it's raining, or whatever the thing is, it's like you can easily just say, yeah, totally, and leave it at that. But if you are interested in conversing, you can say something like, yeah, it's crazy. I had to drive through it on my 2-hour drive to come into town, and then that can lead
2 hours. What you doing 2 hours?
Yeah, you're like, oh, where'd you come from? Like, oh, 2 hours away, huh? And then that leads into more, in my opinion, deep, fulfilling conversation.
What I love about that too,
and you get to know somebody a little bit better, rather than just say,
it gives this person that's a blob some texture. Yeah. Right. Like, holy shit, what's this guy doing 2 hours driving out of town? Right. Or whatever. Right.
Which is another way on not to jump around a whole lot, but if like with online dating, there's a whole thing of like people not being able to converse very well. And
Dude, I have some friends who've been doing a lot of that, and they send Snapchats or screenshots rather,
yeah,
snaps of their chats. And I'm like, dude, how has anyone in this dialogue that I'm seeing ever talked to a human being before?
right. And so that's one way to. I mean, ask the questions about what they're
Dude, ask my
they've got on
friend.
their profile, but
Yeah.
that's another way to easily just say like to take any mundane conversation like it's raining outside and turn it into something more.
If you want to be pragmatic about it too, you also learn how the person communicates.
yeah,
Like my buddy on the Tinder or the Hinge, I think it was Hinge, doesn't matter, dating app. He's like asking this gal, and
This
she
gal?
seemed she seemed pleasant. This gal, she seemed pleasant enough, right? Like there's no good guys or bad guys here. It's just an interesting dialogue that went back and forth. And like he like asked her, hey, I think he asked her a question about her profile, and then led into something. It was a decent like lead in. Like it made sense to lead into like, well, you got any Christmas plans? Like what's going on there? It's that time of year, all that kind of stuff. Holiday plans, and she said, oh, thanks for compliment about the thing on her profile. And
Yeah.
said, nope, no Christmas plans. That was it.
yeah,
And it's like,
it's hard.
if that was in person,
Mm-hmm.
I bet that conversation would have kept going. Even if it was small talk and kind of superfluous,
Maybe
it could have kept going.
I
it's
have
like-
met people
That's fair.
I where they really just don't. There's nothing going on there, and I don't know if it's just
How are you on a? So in real life, like if you're the cashier and I like Steve, you're checking out. I'm the cashier at Casey's. You're checking out, grabbing some snacks or whatever. And I'm like, hey, how's your day going? He's like, not so bad. You? And I was like, not so bad. And there's no more lead-ins. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like that's not the primary function of being there.
sure.
The confusing part, and again, this is not moral good or bad. It's just the confusing part to me. It's like because I've also seen chats of my friends who are on these dating apps, and they often are just like the same thing. It's like they don't give any like hook for the follow up.
Yep.
And I'm like, is this how you talk in real life? Because like the challenge here to me, the confusing part is you've opted into a text-based conversation situation. So like, don't be the dead end, I guess.
It all depends on your intent. Yeah, you would hope that's the case because
But
it's
again,
like
you know, context and intention. That's a good point.
and it's like don't even respond if you have no intention on. And that's where you get into. There's a lot of nuance
There's
to
so much
like
nuance, yeah, 'cause, like
with
how
online.
how do you not do that with hurting the person's feelings, right? Like, how do you say? I think,
You could just not engage, but then oftentimes,
but then you had to match to be engaged to begin with,
well, that's not.
and then you get
with
married, and
Tinder,
you have
sure.
kids, and you buy a house.
But some of the other websites, it's like I could send a girl a message and they get the message. You know, it's just like email or text or whatever. They get the message,
Dude,
and then
I
it's up
want
to
a
them.
Gmail dating app.
And then it's up to them to decide to respond or not. And then it's like if you do
All
respond,
based on your Google searches, and you've got
oh
Gmail
no,
Premium.
that could be a really bad idea.
There's SFW and NSFW.
Just make sure you use your incognito
Oh,
browser.
God. Hey,
Yeah.
there's an idea here. There's an idea here.
Yeah,
Not a
write that down.
monetizable one, not one that I want to share, but
Maybe that's another feature enhancement for Google to pick up.
it's just like the Google. What did they? Google Plus? No. What was the?
Oh yeah, Google Plus.
Was
wasn't it?
Google Plus the
Their
one?
attempt at social?
I hated
media or
it. It
something
fucked
like that.
everything.
It
It wasn't even like it fucked everything royally. It was just tedious. Because all of a sudden, every account you had to have like all these social elements. Like, I just wanted to have an account to browse YouTube on, man, and I had to have like a first name, last name. Why couldn't it just be like Joe Schmo 69, bro? Like,
Yeah, or if you already had a Gmail account, just use that, which I think is what they did eventually.
yeah, they went.
Yeah.
Anyways, doesn't that matters. We're all.
There
over
was
the
a
place today.
show. Was a show.
Is
Did you
was
ever
still-
watch 6 Feet Under? Or have you heard of 6 Feet Under?
Rings a bell. Rings a bell. I'm
Are you
not
familiar
sure.
with the show Dexter?
Yeah, never watched it.
Okay.
Know of it.
So the main guy, Michael C. Hall, was in 6 Feet Under before he was in Dexter.
Okay.
It was like a very opposite character. I mean,
Oh,
like,
really?
Yes, down to like in Dexter, he's this tan dude, and 6 Feet Under, he's like a pale
Because in Dexter, he's like
mortician.
a charming fellow, kind of.
Yeah, but a serial killer.
Right.
In 6 Feet Under, he's a mortician, and just like very opposite character.
Very
if you will.
bookish, very meek.
Yeah, and all that. But anyway, the show 6 Feet Under, definitely worth watching. There's a lot
You've
of
told me about
insight
this
to it.
before. That's how I know of it. You told me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a really great show. So like one of the main characters dies in the pilot,
Yeah.
but he's a main character. You see him quite often.
Because he's like talking to him, right?
He is, but what I realized eventually is that, and this is how great the writing is that it's the person talking to themselves, envisioning this person. So
Right.
they're both developing that main character, the father of the family, as they saw him. So you're developing both characters at the same
Yeah,
time through the
interesting.
dialogue. Because again, you realize that they're just talking to themselves. They're like reflecting back themselves, but the depiction of their father is not entirely inaccurate. So he's developing as
And
himself as well.
in some
Because
ways,
you're
maybe
ultimately
that's-
a reflection of everybody else around you anyways.
Oh, that's got layers, bro.
Yeah, but
I don't know if I
to
could.
bring this back to what kicked this off is you talked about looking back on your life and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, the series finale, oh, it's just fantastic. Like some of the last moments, I've seen grown men cry from the end of this show.
Really, that's how heavy it is.
Because there's an element of one of the characters basically looking back on her life, and it's just like a quick montage of moments, like very heavy moments in her life, just like thrown at you.
You just feel
They
the
just
whole
put a
weight.
funnel
of it.
in your mouth and shove it into your
Oh.
body, and it
It's
just
so
like,
heavy.
and oh man, and that's like when you're talking about looking back in your life, it made me think of that. It's like
At the same time, when you pass, I imagine it's just as much of a moment as any other moment. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't carry. It carries with it the weight of
Death
everything.
doesn't technically exist. I mean, it's like show me what jumping is. You know, like you can jump, but you can't say like concretely like it's a
Here's
happening.
jumping. I'm
Yeah,
holding
yeah.
jumping.
Right, it's a happening. It's a thing, you know, and so like the death itself is a process.
Yeah.
And like there's no real moment per se. There's a transitionary period where something happens,
This is
but you're never dead.
Stories-
Like there's no, you know, like
stories we tell are truly the most effective storytelling in my mind is generally fairly naturalistic or a-naturalistic, but everything's rooted on it. It's cyclical, right? Like
Yeah.
because everything in life is cyclical, and it's all going back.
check out Devil's Hour. Like
Devil's Hour.
Start watching that
I'm gonna
as
give that
soon
a
as you
shot.
can.
I'll
That-
give it a shot tomorrow.
Speaking of cyclical, there's a theme in that.
Oh yeah.
I want to talk to you about. Yeah,
I will watch the first
Term.
episode tomorrow.
and you'll be hooked. There's only 6 episodes.
For the first season, really? Hour
Well,
long
it's a
kind of
British
stuff?
show, so yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're a little bit longer. I
Yep.
think
I
they're
know what
45 to
you're
an
talking
hour or
about. Sherlock
something.
and all that shit had that. But what I was gonna say was kind of bring this as we maybe come close to a close for tonight because I think we've been going for 40 some odd minutes.
Oh,
After it took us like 2 hours, it took me 2 hours to get this shit figured out. And we don't even know if this is gonna be salvageable. Hopefully it is. I think we've been holding the mics
Sure.
far enough away. But nonetheless, one of the things I want to bring that back, the cyclical stuff, is like it kind of ties in thematically to me with that idea of ownership and that we don't own things. One of the things that I'm an only child, my parents,
yeah.
and I have a great relationship. And my mom was like, "Do we need to not leave our stuff to you in the will?" And I'm like, "Look, I exist in a system that I don't think is ideal for the human experience.
Yeah.
Does not mean
I don't want your stuff.
that I'm not going to try my best to survive." Because one of the things she was like, "Are you just going to give away all of our stuff?" I'm like,
You won't care if you're not here.
that's one of the things too. Was like, you know, I didn't say that. I was like, I think my dad probably thought that. He was like,
Yeah.
"I don't give a shit." But at the same time, it's like, then talking about ego, that's where my ego comes in. I'm like, you know, you guys got like an acreage in Austin. I'd sure fucking like to sell that. And
Yeah.
damn it, you know.
Or have a nice vacation home or something.
Imagine if that wasn't even the circumstance we had to live in.
Yeah.
But that's tangential to the reason I was going back to that, which is everything is cyclical in some way or another. It's not A to B to A again, but it's A to B to A prime. It's A, but a little bit different. And then B prime, a little little bit different, but still all part of the same cycle, right? Life, death, all these things. It's all cyclical.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges in life is recognizing when we are philosophically or literally at odds with the cyclical nature of things, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of capitalism fucking struggles with this idea. I feel like I say capitalism like it's a fucking monotype, but like I think about quarterly profits at all the corporations I used to work for, right? And how it's like you just got to keep on going.
Yeah.
Not just grow. The profits have to keep the profit margin
Constant growth. Yeah.
needs to be like we have more profits. This relative value, like we had 10% profits. Now we need to have 20% profits, 30, whatever.
And if you're down one quarter, it's a catastrophe.
And it's like, but things aren't infinite. Are we just pushing the buck down the line? And while that's separate from from an individual necessarily, one of the things we can do for ourselves is, and this goes to like what I was talking about, where it's like, okay, I could just imagine and plan and stake my whole life on the happy path of whatever free will conversation we're having, or I could take a second, cycle back, and look at what my life would be like in the unhappy path and be prepared for that, so that when my life does cycle from happy to unhappy, I'm prepared.
Yeah.
And not necessarily that I won't be unhappy or won't be miserable, but I'll at least be equipped to deal with it. Because if you ignore something, doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. And when you say equipped, it doesn't necessarily have to be like preparing for the apocalypse and make sure you've got canned vegetables in your basement.
Equipment is not.
It could be just something as simple as just the fact of you
acknowledging that this could be
not just that, but going through the mind exercise of experiencing that and going through that, you've basically changed your expectations to say that if when this does happen,
you've walked that mile.
I've already expected that. I know what's going to happen, or at least I won't care as much or be as like
you can
tied
be
into that thought.
Because you've gone out and you've been on that journey. You return to now.
Yeah.
When you do possibly make your way there physically, you can be present there.
Right.
Because you know you've been there and you've been through the other side of it too.
Yeah.
It's
like a
all,
practice in a way.
Yeah, it's practice. It's practicing practice. Steve, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up here? I feel like we've been going for a hot minute.
Yeah. Just go watch Devil's Hour. It's a good.
Devil's Hour, good stuff. Well, this has been. Where do we go from here? I've been Tex.
I don't know.
I don't know where we go.
I don't know.
I think I go to a hotel right now.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I think I go home, which I'm already in.
You're just gonna sit right there.
Yeah.
For the rest of the.
Until the next episode.
That would be kind of funny because I'll be remote by that one. I'll be back in Texas. You just turn on and the camera's
still
like,
in the corner,
right here, same lighting and everything. He's like, and you're just talking at this wall, but I'm not here.
Same T-shirt.
That would be really funny. I would be a big fan of that. That'd be so dumb. But thanks for having me over.
Yeah.
Thank you for the tour and everything. This has been a lot of fun. You got a fucking sick setup here, bro.
Thank you.
It's pretty cool. And hopefully by the time we do this in person again, I will have a better setup over there for a 2 USB mic thing.
And I'll have a better setup here.
I don't know how much better it can get than this.
It can get better.
It can always be better. Or worse.
Yeah.
I don't know. Might not always be able to get worse.
Anyway.
That was a jab at you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.